What I learned from interviewing 300 relatives. I could do. What I'll probably do is do a more like separated approach because I learned so much. But a brief overview is a year and a half ago, I spent 6 months driving around Europe and North America interviewing relatives, 300 relatives in 4 countries, I believe. I didn't get to Germany, so what did I learn? Well, I learned my own history, my familial history. I learned why I am the way that I am. I learned why my personality, some of the ways I thought I was unique, but then you're like, oh no, I'm this because of this person. I'm this because of this great grandparent. I mean, I also learned like perspective and age, and so most people around my age in their late teens, early 20s are so focused on the here and now. And I remember after I graduated high school, like thinking that like 20 was old, 22, 24. But it changes you when you're 19 and you're sitting across from your great great uncle who's 101, and then you're next to his brother who's 99, and you meet like World War II vets. Like all, I had the privilege to meet, I believe, 6 of my great grandparents' siblings. I met every single one that's still alive, and I interviewed all of them. And it changes you when you realize you're talking to people who personally had a relationship with your great great grandparents and potentially great 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 grandparents. It bridges the gap between the unknown and the known. So I'd say that's one huge thing. I gained perspective on life and time, and because in the criticism of the culture today is like with YouTube, if you're aware of the internet, it makes you feel like you need to be famous early, or you're never going to be anything. Just speaking for like the culture. No. So it was kind of relieving and freeing at the same time. It took a lot of pressure off. And also answered a lot of questions about my personality, my interests, my personal fears. One positive thing I did learn from it was like your grandparents are, you really do look up to them when you're a kid, but you don't really see them as a person, or not as a person with flaws in some ways. You see them more as like the matriarch or the patriarch of a certain specific part of your family. And once you meet like their aunts, their uncles, their siblings, their cousins, like you learn stories about them and you realize that they were young once and they did stupid shit, and like there's a lot of positives from that. You get a closer relationship with them because you show that you're interested in understanding who they were and how they got to be the person who they are and why they are that way. And it's a very connecting time because it brings you if you spend the time to understand your past, if you have the opportunity to, it brings you closer to your parents. If you're meeting their cousins, their siblings. I mean, I interviewed all of my parents' siblings, and I met all of my mother's first cousins. When I was in Norway, I met 150 cousins. No, correction, we have 150 cousins in Norway. I met 96. I met 75 in 2 weeks, and then re-met them, and then met extra ones on the side. And that changes you in your perspective for family. I mean, when you realize entire islands are just full, every person on this island is your cousin somehow. It changes you. I mean, it makes you realize, oh, like this used to be normal. It makes you not feel as alone, too. One benefit from it was that I got to see, coming from a mixed European background, I got to see it was a wide variety of stories. It wasn't just Norwegian. Like I could go to my Italian cousins and hear stories about the mafia, like what happened during World War II, Mussolini, like incredible stories about Florence, and then it becomes alive because you're actually there. You're in the house. You're on an island which your family has lived for as long as records have been kept since the 1600s. Like, I mean, everything has been here. You know the jobs that your your 12 great grandparents, 12 times great grandparents did. And once you realize that, and just by being born in the West now in this time period, you become grateful for the fact that you can literally do anything. That you're more than just instead of having to be born in Italy, I would have to be a book peddler. If I was born in Norway 200 years ago, I would have to either be a fisherman or make barrels to store cod. Now I can do anything because of, like, I mean, if I was born in Russia, I'd have to be a farmer. If I was born in Germany or Austria, I'd have to be a farmer. And I don't want to farm wheat. So I have a future now. I can do anything. And I think that's one of the problems with the culture war today is a lot of people my generation have no historical awareness. They have no idea how hard it was for their own grandparents, their own great-grandparents, and they just sit there mad about everything, and they're frustrated instead of being grateful and realizing how blessed they are just even to be born in a country at this time period. So it gave me that too, and it made it harder for me to be swayed by a lot of lies people say about. It brings you context. You realize, there's a lot of problems, but things have been in general are getting better. Maybe things will work out then, but maybe they won't. Who knows? I learned a lot about my parents. Most people aren't really aware of anything about their parents from the moment they're born on. They're aware, not before. And I spent the time to get to know them, understand what they were like when they were kids, and it brings you closer to them. And that's important. I don't really know. I mean, it's the fact that you realize that there's a place you can go all around the world. There's places you can go in which your ancestors have lived forever. Most people don't get that experience. So most people don't value it, and it's like if you value it and you spend the time to go find it, then you'll probably end up being pretty good in the end. And also one thing it does teach you is it teaches you ways to be successful, because it's like doing a master's class in just life, because you see different outlets on how to live. So when I was interviewing 300 people, it's like it ranged from the age of 101 to 22. You see the whole spectrum of life. People who have PhDs, doctorates, who are multimillionaires to barely even making it. And you see how different decisions lead people down different paths, and how sometimes things don't work out, sometimes they really do. And it helps you gain an appreciation for working hard and how to get to that point of success. And that even though no matter how hard you work, there's a chance that it won't pay off. So basically what I saw was 300 different ways to live life. 300 different ways in person, and then the stories from people from way back in time. So probably approximately like 400 different ways to live life. Decisions that you make and how they affect you. And that teaches you a lot of things. And if you observe life, then you don't make the mistakes of the past. Or if you do, you go in knowing that there's a potential for have a certain outcome, positive or negative. But there is a danger in that. So, for example, the reason why I went down and interviewed all these family members is because I left my religion, and I ended up leaving a set cult to be falling into the judgment of my ancestors. I didn't realize it was happening at the time, but in hindsight, I've been able to see that. And you need a worldview, and you need stories to live up to, and maybe you'll get them from religion or your family, but I would say probably family is better because there's a connecting, it's inside of you. But that's for another topic.